This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is an iconic and highly popular actress and singer who's been dazzling audiences for over 5 decades. On the big screen, she's appeared in many great movies, including Crazy Mama, W.C. Fields and Me, Leo and Loree, The High Country, Visiting Hours, Viper, The Perfect Tenant, Bender, Broken Halos, and Paul's Promise, for which she received numerous prestigious film festival awards. And on television, we all remember her as Ashley, Fonzie's girlfriend in the mega hit TV series Happy Days. She also played Ben Matlock's daughter, Charlene, in the first season of Matlock, and she played Pam Beesly's mother, Helene, in The Office. She's also co-starred in many other TV shows, including Beacon Hill, Robin's Hoods, Port Charles, First Monday, The Oath, General Hospital, After Forever, The Bold and the Beautiful, and Claire-ity, for which she received an Indie Series Award as Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy Series, in addition to dozens of guest starring roles in classic TV shows like Hawaii Five-0, The Waltons, Murder, She Wrote, Touched by an Angel, Homeland, True Blood, Reckless, and many more. Our guest has also appeared in a whole slew of TV movies and miniseries, including Young Pioneers, The Flame is Love, The Last Days of Pompeii, In Self-Defense, Web of Deceit, Incident at Deception Ridge, The Story First Behind the Unabomber, Stranger at the Door, Maid of Honor, and Doomsday Mom, to name just a few. And on Broadway, our guest starred in Getting and Spending, and she played Aunt Polly in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. She's also appeared on stage in 7 Deadly Sins, 4 Deadly Sinners, The Glass Menagerie, and many other theatrical productions. And beyond all of that, our guest is a magnificent singer. She's released 6 albums: Alone Together, Midnight Caravan, Up Jumped Spring, Taking a Chance on Love, This Could Be the Start, and a wonderful live album called Out of This World. She appears in concert at the most prestigious music venues in America, and if all of that weren't enough, she and her partner Patrick Duffy own and operate a company selling sourdough starter kits called Duffy's Dough, and 100% of the profits are donated to charities that are working to eradicate food scarcity and hunger. I'm delighted to welcome the one and only Linda Purl to our show. Linda, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You were born in Greenwich, Connecticut, but at the age of 5, your family moved to Japan. How long did it take you to learn to speak Japanese?
5 minutes. You know, that's what happens when you're little. You just pick it up on the street. I never studied it. Well, I guess I did a little bit in school, but basically I just, you pick it up. And I'm so glad, because I'm a lazy student. And it's a difficult language, and I don't think I ever would have learned it had I not picked it up on the street. Not that many people in Japan spoke English at that time. I mean, they had no reason to. So anyway, which was lucky for me, because I got to learn the language.
You studied acting in Japan, and you even appeared on stage at the Imperial Theater in Tokyo in The King and I in Japanese. And when you got back to America, you studied at the Lee Strasberg Institute. What would you say was the major difference between American acting techniques and Japanese acting techniques?
Everything. I was in Japan not that long ago and went past the Imperial Theater, and this wave of, nostalgia came through me. So, well, I remember specifically doing The King and I was 11 in this beautiful 2,000 seat theater. It's just magnificent, great production, full orchestra. Anyway, one night in the story, as Anna and she's leaving Japan. Well, I played Anna's son. In Japan they do kabuki and no and takarazuka and everybody plays everything. So I was playing Anna's son, and at this particular point in the story, when they're leaving and they think they're saying goodbye, real emotions came up for me that particular night. And that was a new experience for me as an 11-year-old. And after the show, my dresser said, the the director wants to see you in his office. And I thought, I knew he was going to say, oh my gosh, that was a particularly good job you did tonight. And I came in and he raked me over the coals, stood in front of his desk. He said, Ikimasen. He just said, this is not how to do. And he was right, because the Japanese, may not be the case now, but at the time, the Japanese style of acting for contemporary plays was much more technical. It was much more presentational, sort of how acting had been in the West through the 40s, before the advent of Stanislavski's influence coming into certainly American acting technique. So I was doing a much more naturalistic performance that night, which doesn't work. It has to be one or the other. Everybody has to be on the same page. And I was not on the same page that night. And that's why I got in trouble. Well, I didn't even know what that other page was until I was back in the States. Now I was 15 or 16, I guess, and I was studying at Strasberg Institute. And it was the antithesis, really, of everything that I had been taught. This was, you don't need to project, you don't need to articulate, ignore the audience, and be real, and be grounded, and just perform in the moment. And so there was a lot of improvisational movement in the work. There was not a particular adherence to a theme, or even the text in some cases. So it was a huge stretch for me, but I'm grateful to have been exposed and to have been trained in both. Ultimately, like anything we do in life, you sort of take these different influences and then you digest it and you make it your own, for better and worse. Kind of make up your own technique as you go.
Well, it certainly made you very unique. Now, in one of your first movies, Crazy Mama, you got to work with three legends, Cloris Leachman, Ann Southern, and Jim Backus. Did you get to know any of them?
Cloris, you got to know Cloris. I think because, well, I played her daughter for one thing, so we were closer, but also she was the most accessible. Cloris was, well, when she passed away, Donnie Most, who was also in the film, long-term friend, we commented on how lucky we were to have met and worked with Cloris when we were that little. She was a unicorn. She was such a force of nature, an incredible actress, and she was creative at every level. And she had a spark of joy in her and mischief that was intoxicating to be around. Not anything, you could ever hope to duplicate, but she threw open a door to what was possible. So, and in terms of the immediacy of the work, and her work was so energized, and she loved life, she loved lunch, she loved her family, she loved the feel of her cotton dress. I mean, she was so, her energy was so kinetic and so tangible. It was great to be around.
And what a great role model for you to have so early in your career.
Absolutely.
Now, in 1976, you played a character by the name of Bobby Jean in a TV movie called State Fair, which was supposed to be the pilot for a TV series. It was actually the fourth film version of that story. Were you influenced at all by the other versions of the movie?
No, I would say I wasn't. I think I felt that there may have been a danger in that. Now, that's not to say that the film overall wasn't, that the director wasn't, and the writers certainly, but I think, our job at hand was to do this particular version. So no, one of the things I remember from that is that Lee J. Cobb's daughter, Julie Cobb, was in the show. And it was just what a lovely, lovely woman, and has remained a friend, all these years.
Well, just for all the film buffs out there, I should mention that the other three film versions were in 1933, 1945, and 1962. So, Linda, in 1976, you played President Theodore Roosevelt's daughter Alice in a great TV miniseries called Eleanor and Franklin. How did you prepare for that role?
Well, I read a lot, and at that time, at least in my elders, my catalog of elders, there were people that had met Alice, that were familiar with who she was, and she was a iconic figure. And gosh, she was fun to play. She was so opinionated, so tart, so strong. Anyway, it was, that was a real thrill to do that. And oh my God, Jane Alexander and Ed Herman, and I mean the cast and the direction and the writing, everything about that project was a thrill to have been a part of. Maybe not the corset. That was a little tight, but the rest of it was great.
Well, of course, it was tight. Your performance wasn't. In 1981, you portrayed another real person, the 19th century journalist Nellie Bly, in a TV movie called The Adventures of Nellie Bly. Did you do a lot of research for that role, Linda?
I did. I also produced or co-produced, that project. Yes, she was a fascinating person. She was a pioneering journalist. She was incredibly brave. She thought outside the box. She was ambitious and had a real vision for herself and what she wanted to do. So at a time that it was not, talk about a glass ceiling, you know, but she didn't define herself in terms of limitations. She went after what she wanted to do, and was, I mean, she was a force in the world of journalism. Her reportage changed things. She exposed things. So she didn't preach about what she wanted changed. She just would get them exposed. In the film, in that case, it was mental institutions. And then she would let the change take care of itself. I think she had a great trust in human nature, that if the truth gets out there, which is what she did, the rest will take care of itself. That was somebody else's job. But she was a pioneering force for truth
Oh, absolutely.
in journalism.
And a huge legend, and you brought her to life for all of us. Now, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a retired criminal court judge. Did you know that?
I did not.
Well, the reason I mention that is because I was very impressed with a TV movie you made in 1977 called Little Ladies of the Night. You played a runaway girl who gets caught up in prostitution and can't get away from her pimp. Linda, I have to tell you that movie, and specifically your performance, were very realistic based on what I used to see in court. And I want you to know that.
Wow. Wow, what a heartbreaking thing for you to witness serially, I'm sure, in your court. Well, I did do research for that also. And sadly, I had a manager at the time, and a kind of a big guy. And so he and I went down to Hollywood Boulevard and would talk to people. Now, not everybody would talk to us because they thought we were cops or something. But I mean, some of the stories were just jaw-breaking. These little girls, and I wasn't that much older than any of them when we talked to them. And they'd come to Hollywood with ideas of being a star, and this was how they were going to start. And there was just nothing good about it. It was, the whole thing was heart aching. So I was glad to be a part of telling that story.
It's a very important story to tell. The movie is still very current, very timely. Unfortunately, the victimization, the neglect, the abuse, the luring that goes on because of the internet has only made that movie even more important. So I wanted you to know that it's a movie that really, really stands out in your body of work. And you got to work with the late, great Louis Gossett Jr., who appeared on our show shortly before he passed away.
Oh, did he now?
What are your memories of working with Lou?
Oh, Lou is great. He was a guy. Everybody loved him. The crew loved him. The whole cast loved him. And also what a wonderful actor. So, I mean, he was a star when I worked with him. So I was thrilled to have a chance to work with him, but also then to discover that he was just such a dude and so cool and so accessible.
Very sincere, very authentic.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, a few years after playing a teen prostitute, you played an adult prostitute along with Karen Valentine and Jamie Lee Curtis in a TV movie called Money on the Side. Did you enjoy making that movie?
I did. In fact, I just a couple of months ago, I had dinner with Karen, and which is just so much fun after all these years. We had actually a terrifying thing that our director had us do. He had the three of us, and I guess I'm not sure what the setup was. Maybe we were waiting for the pimp or somebody to come by. Anyway, he just said, do an improv, just talk. Like, what? I'm scared, but because they were who they were, and by that time we were all friends and we'd been in the pocket and we sort of knew what our characters were. And this director just gave us the opportunity to talk. I don't remember how it started. Maybe he posed a couple of questions. Maybe he said, talk about this topic or this aspect, or how do you balance your work as a prostitute with being a mother, and just riff on that topic. But it was the first and only time I've done that, and so glad to have experienced that with Jamie and with Karen, two fabulous women.
Do you know if the footage was used?
It was used. I mean, it's been an eon since I've seen it, but yes, he did use bits of it. Yeah, he did.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
In the late 70s, you made a TV movie about another very important social issue, teen suicide. The movie was called A Last Cry for Help, co-starring the wonderful Shirley Jones. What was that experience like?
Well, it was impactful. It was impactful. I mean, working with Shirley was so lovely. I mean, what a spectacular woman. And Shirley's remained a friend all these years. I'm so grateful to say. So Murray was interesting. In the film, there's a reconciliation, I think, between father and daughter. And we were doing it. The film was shot outside. And so all the crew was just standing around there. And it was a scene, if I recall, it was one of those scenes where Murray had to go from 0 to 60. So it's just kind of a ho-hum, how you doing? And like that, he has this big emotion to portray. The father breaks down in front of the daughter, basically. So we did this scene. He was magnificent. And the crew at that point in time, there were no women on the crew. It was all men, these big burly crew guys. And they gave him a round of applause, a standing ovation, to Murray. And now Murray broke down again. And so a few minutes later, Murray and I were standing off to the side. And he said, I was an alcoholic for years, a raging alcoholic for years. And at some point, not too long before this scene, he had joined AA. So he had been sober. And this had been the first time that he had gone to do a huge emotional scene without alcohol. And he was terrified. And so the fact that he had managed to do the scene without having a drink, and that the crew had responded in that way was, and I was so privileged, that he shared that intimacy with me. And anyway, it was, what I got to witness, besides a great actor at work, was a personal triumph. He overcame something huge, and I'd like to think that he stood on that strength for the rest of his life. I hope he did.
Oh, I sure hope he did. What a privilege to participate in such
You
a
bet.
validating and
You
really
bet.
a very healing, redemptive
You
moment
bet.
in his life and his career.
You bet, Harvey. I don't
Now,
think he mind telling that story. And the other thing about that movie is that, certain, not now so much, but back then people would write fan. I mean, there's so many ways for people to reach people now. I don't think it happens to the extent that it did before, but you'd get a lot of fan mail back that would come to the network or the studio or wherever. And there were so many letters that came in after that film. I watched the film and I knew how to talk to my daughter or my son or my husband. I watched the film and I was thinking about committing suicide and I decided not to. There's one in particular from a 17-year-old girl who said I was going to kill myself. And I watched that film and I've decided not to. I mean, come on. What else is there if you get to be a part of something that is impactful like that? I mean, it, you know,
and you've done it so many times, you've probably noticed that I'm mentioning projects you've been involved in that had great significance in terms of social issues because I love doing that. And I'm about to mention another one. It was a 1979 TV movie called Women at West Point, which was about the first female cadets to enter the US military academy at West Point. I think that was one of your most historically significant projects, don't you think?
oh, well, thank you. Yes, that was such a privilege to do. I remember flying east to do that film, and I thought, I mean, I don't come from a military family. I didn't really know very many people in the military, and I thought, how am I going to jump into this foreign world? Well, we shot it at West Point, which was a thrill, and they gave us two cadets to be with us, to just be with us, to be there for conversation if we had any questions, how to salute, how to line your belt buckle up with the seam of your shirt, etc. They were our mentors, teachers, guides, friends, you name it. And they were my age. And I I may have had some, anyway, whatever ideas, preconceived ideas I had about who these people would be were wiped clean. These were incredible people across the board. They were smart. They were they were incredible athletes, strong. To a person, they were people of faith. They had whatever it, I mean, Jewish, whatever it was. They, they had a sense of something more powerful than that they leaned on, called on, believed in. They didn't preach. It was just an innate part of themselves and part of what made them humble. That's not a quality I expected to find. There was a sophistication in the ethos of these young people. They set a standard for me of what could be. And this will sound so silly, but I mean, maybe as an actress, when you're doing a role, you try to find common threads between who you are and the person you're portraying. But I did find many commonalities between a military atmosphere and a set. They have a uniform, we have a costume, and it dictates a lot about your behavior. They have colonels and generals, we have directors and producers. They have assigned tasks, we have a call sheet. We're going to turn up at 5 a.m. We're going to be ready to go by 6, and you better have your lines ready and be prepared. So, and everyone is accountable, but you are part of a team effort. And that was certainly true in the military. Anyway, I felt many, I'm bold to say, felt some real common threads that I had not expected to find. Now, years later, about, well, however many years ago, I was at a function and I didn't know anybody, and I saw these two gals across the way that looked like, nice ladies about my age, and they looked very approachable. They looked like moms and all of that. And so I just made a beeline to them, and I figured they were this was out of state in the countryside. And I figured that that's where they had their lives, and they were nice, ladies who had married and raised a passel of kids and maybe served on the PTA. So I introduced myself to them, and boy, was I wrong. These were retired Air Force generals. And once they started to tell me a little bit about what they did, I was totally starstruck. But they knew who I was, because when they were in the Air Force Academy, they too were in the first class of women to graduate from the Air Force Academy. So they were well aware of women at West Point, because it all happened in the same year. All the branches of military opened up their training to women. So they were like, oh my gosh. And I was, oh my gosh. So they remain friends to this day. And then I was somewhere performing in some State Department thing, a concert in Germany. And this fellow came up, and he was a general, American general serving in overseas. And he said that he had been one of the cadets at West Point when I was there. So it was just such fun to have those threads loosely weave back into your life. And, I got to work with Andy Stevens, with whom I did a couple of projects. And so it was a real privilege to be afforded the insight to these young people. I'll ramble here. Years later, when my son was 13, a person that I met at West Point had started a program. He was a China hound, and he was a West Point grad and a retired Army general. And his specialty was China. And he is worried about China, and had served as our military attaché over there for years. And so he devised this program where West Point cadets who were specializing in Chinese would go and do a homestay smack in the middle of China. I mean, throw a dart at the map, the middle of the map of China, and that's where it is, this tiny little town. Somehow he made a connection there. And he would send the cadets there, and they would work for 3 weeks, and it's a wheat raising area. So they would, feed their cattle and help them do whatever you do with wheat and thrash the wheat. And his idea was that these cadets would come away with better Chinese, but that if and when those young cadets, any one of them became a general and they had their finger on the button, they would think, wait a minute, I know someone there. I had a bowl of rice with someone there. I sat in their house and had tea with them. It would humanize the nation, So knowing about this program, I asked if I could piggyback onto them. And so I did, with my son, who I say was 13 at the time. And so we had one crossover day when the cadets were at the end of their 3-week homestay, and they were just giving us the download on what they'd been able to do, what courses they'd been teaching, what worked, what didn't work. Of course, they spoke Chinese. We didn't. And then they left, and my son and I stayed on, and then we taught English. My son ran soccer drills, and it was a great experience for us. But once again, being in contact with those young cadets, they were so impressive. You just couldn't have hoped for a better representation of America over there.
Well, I think that your legacy, having been part of that movie, Women at West Point, is always going to be something that will make you very special in the military world. And
thank you.
I want to mention another TV movie you made called Like Normal People, co-starring Sean Cassidy, which was based on the true story of a developmentally delayed couple who fell in love and were determined to get married despite the objections of their families and their friends. Linda, you really deserve a lot of credit for participating in so many movies that convey important themes about social justice. You should be very proud of that.
Oh, thank you so much. I've never framed my career in that way, nor has anybody said that. I appreciate that very much, Harvey. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. And now, for the sake of completeness, I should also mention that you also played a girl with a learning disability in another movie called The High Country, opposite Timothy Bottoms, who recently appeared on our show. So I have to ask you, Linda, did you look for roles in socially significant projects, or was it just a coincidence that you ended up in so many of these great movies?
I'd love to be able to take credit for it. No, just a coincidence. But I am grateful that I got to do roles that were challenging, that I learned so much from. I mean, that's one of the things about being an actor and actress. You do get drawn into these worlds outside of your own, and it's a wonderful education. I did not complete college, but I feel that in some ways my career completed it for me.
It's destiny. So, Linda, I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions about Happy Days because you've given dozens of interviews about the show. I really think you've said everything there is to be said about it. But I do have one question, and it's this. You first played Richie's girlfriend, Gloria, in season 2, and then 8 seasons later, you were Fonzie's girlfriend, Ashley. So naturally, I'm going to ask you, who was the better boyfriend, Richie or the Fonz?
Oh, that's not fair. Oh my gosh. Well, Fonzie's character, you know, took on a lot because he took the girlfriend on and the girlfriend's little daughter. So he has to get extra brownie points for taking on a single mom.
That's fair. I can live with that. What was it like working with Andy Griffith on Matlock?
Andy was fascinating. He was not at all what I expected. I mean, of course, charming, hysterically funny. I mean, scary charming. He had a magnetic personality and tremendous raconteur. What I didn't know about him was that he was so smart. He was an intellectual. I think part of his talent came from the fact that he could read people. He had tremendous insights, a sophisticated insight into human nature. Like many comics, he had a dark side. I didn't expect that, but it was there, and just part of the burden of his talent.
Why did you leave after the first season of Matlock?
Mm. Well, hmm. It was it was a difficult decision. Yeah, it was a very difficult decision.
You don't regret it?
No, I don't. It was the right decision for me at the time.
Sounds like it was bittersweet.
It was. I mean, it was a great gig. I was so grateful for it. I think it's fair to say that the role did not develop in the way that it had been intended to to develop. So that was painful. And I felt that I was only staying because it was a nice steady paycheck, which is rare for an actress. And I didn't have a family to raise at the time, and I couldn't justify getting dressed up in a nice suit and sort of sitting in the background. So, and so there were discussions about possibilities, and then anyway, it's how things work.
Well, it
Uh,
sounds to me like you're an intuitive person. You have instincts. You wanted more for your career and for yourself at that time, and you had to follow those instincts. And I'm glad you don't regret it. You shouldn't.
Thank you. You know what I did? Somebody called Wall Street Journal, something called to do an interview about the reboot of Matlock. So I watched it, and it's fabulous. It's just, I mean, of course, they have wonderful Kathy Bates and a terrific cast, but boy, I think that for all of as successful as the first Matlock was, there were things about it that did not get realized, potentials that show had that did not get realized. Part of it was the era, but boy, if there was anything to correct, they've done that on steroids in the new version of the Matlock. So I'm very happy that they did so, that they have Kathy, that that the show is as fantastic as it is.
I hope they get you to do a guest spot.
That would be fun. That would be fun.
Linda, when you look at the incredible diversity in the types of roles you've played over the years and all the genres you've worked in, from comedies to dramas, romance, pictures, thrillers, horror movies, you've managed to escape being typecast. Did you have a particular strategy in your career, or was it just good luck?
It's just a journeyman actress. I think I have no strategy. I read about, these wonderful big stars that have had strategy, and I was just going to do this. I had my 5-year plan. Not me. It's gypsy. Someone offers me a role, I'm more apt to say yes than no. So it's a gypsy life, and but I'm so grateful that I've been able to carry on. What my career has not had is that one thing that sort of shot me like a rocket up to the sky. But
But you've had longevity,
I
you've
have.
had enormous likability and popularity.
Thank
And
you.
let's not forget Linda Purl, the singer. I think I first heard you sing in a 1977 episode of The Waltons. I think you sang
Oh,
two songs, I'll Fly Away and Vanessa's song, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, you're frequently referred to as a jazz vocalist, even though you sing standards, show tunes, pop songs. How would you characterize your musical style?
Definitely jazz. I don't do pop. I can't sing pop to save my life. I'm jazz. I do the Great American Songbook in a jazz feel. So I'm not sure that that a cadre of fabulous jazz singers would think of me as a jazz singer, but it is the genre that I sing in. But really strictly a Great American Songbook, a little bit of, well, that's not true. We do some musical comedy things from Shall We Dance, and anyway, a bunch of, but again, in a jazz feel. It's very joyful. It's funny because right now I'm starting to learn lines for a one woman play. It's a 64-page monologue. I'm terrified, and but I'm also getting ready for we do that in March, but I'm doing some concerts in Florida in a week. So during the course of the day, I work on the play and then I sing the show. And I love the play, don't get me wrong, that I'm going to do, but the singing is so joyful. It's just it really is different. It's sort of left brain, right brain. They're different experiences. The singing of it is much more physical somehow, and the focus of it is well, I don't know, it's kind of woo woo, but to literally be involved with harmony, it has to do something to the molecules in your body. It has to realign things. It feels like a big fat vitamin pill to get to sing through a show.
And you're singing songs that are part of the musical fabric of this country, of the world. You have a cabaret show called This Could Be the Start based on your latest album. The show's been getting rave reviews. I know you'll be performing that show, as you mentioned, in Florida next month. Linda, I want to read you what Stephen Mosher from Broadway World had to say about your show. He said, I'm quoting him here, Linda Purl is a singing actress and classic beauty who is equal parts poet, philosopher, and pundit. She had her audience firmly in the palm of her hand thanks to her warm and welcoming demeanor, her thoughtful and thought provoking rhetoric, and some of the most engaging and enjoyable music ever to be found on the nightclub stage. Linda, that's an incredible review.
Oh,
Congratulations.
thank you so much. Well, Stephen's very generous, so I appreciate his being there and his comments. About 16 years ago, I was invited to do a concert in New York, but they said I had to use their music director. And I had been working with a music director I loved for years, but I was greedy for the job. So I said, okay. And I went into our first day of rehearsal, and here's this young guy, painfully shy, sitting at the keys. And I just thought, oh God, this will be terrible. And then he started to play. My life changed. His name is Ted Firth, and we've been together musically ever since. He's an incredible jazz musician and arranger. And he really, the music director that I had, Ron Abel, who I love, he's chosen family. would be the first to say that he's much more Broadway sort of show tune sound. And I'd always been leaning more towards a bluesy, jazzy discipline. And that's not where Ron enjoys to play, but it's Ted's wheelhouse. So with Ron's blessing, I switched to Ted, and we've done 4 albums together now. He is just, he's off the charts. He works with a lot of people, and I'm privileged to be among them. But
Well,
his
your album, This Could Be the Start, which is just one of my favorite Linda Purl albums. I want people to know it's not just a show, it's the name of your latest album. I was really struck by what jazz music critic Matt Micucci wrote about the album. He said this: Linda Purl is renowned for infusing classic show tunes and jazz standards with a distinctive narrative eloquence. Her sublime vocals and sultry arrangements explore profound nuances of fleeting passion, exuding intimacy, and sensuality. Another great review, Linda. How does it feel when you hear people react to your music in such a heartfelt, positive way?
Oh, I'm astonished. I'm grateful. I'm astonished. I mean, come on, if you're having a blue day, just kind of thumb through one of those. It's like, hey, you know, but it's such a it's such an adventure. I mean, it's so jazz is, it's in the moment, it's live, it's like water, it moves you, you move in it. And then because most of them we do get these chances to record, but most of it happens live in front of an audience. And so that's also a very, very joyful and energizing. And I've recently we got to do a show in Venice, and that was interesting because you perform, and also in Japan last year. So you perform in different countries and you kind of pick up on different people's, I don't know, likes or dislikes and appetites for music, what they spark to more strongly than other things. So, and it's so, I mean, the mountain of the learning curve, that's the thing that keeps bringing me back. You learn anytime you sing a song, it feels at some level like a prayer. It focuses your energy and your thought and your spirit, and it's a spiritual discipline. And the fact that your body is involved with it, it's profoundly satisfying and as I say, challenging, mysterious somehow. One time I had a funny experience with Ted. We'd been doing this show in one town, and this is our last night there. And we had 2 pickup musicians, local music, or 3, I guess, terrific guys, bass, drums, and percussion. And in this particular song, there was a huge percussion solo. And the guys that we were working with were in awe of Ted. So Ted was the captain of our ship. It's appropriate as their music director. And the boys were good, but I had sons about their age. And so I knew that particularly the percussionist he'd given 99.9%, but there was another level I was sure he could play. So I don't know. Something was in the air that night. And we finished this big percussion number. We start to go into the last number, and I stopped and I asked the audience if we could go back and do the big exciting number we'd just done, and they were game. So I turned to the boys and I said, "Give me everything you got. Take your shirts off. I can take it." Now, this is not in my nature to say, but I was, I don't know, at another arena that in my mind at that point, I guess. And I turned to Ted, whose eyes are like, "Oh my God, what's happened to her? She's out of her mind." And he said, "What do you want, Linda? Faster?" And I said, "No, more." And Ted Firth stood up. He took off his suit jacket. He folded it. He put it on the bench. He took all the music off the piano on the floor. He laid down the music stand and then pushed the stand of the grand forward. So now he had access to the hammers and the strings. He's still standing up. He dove into the strings with his hands, and he starts playing the strings like a like a horizontal harp. And it's unusual. It was all improv. And this is not how the song traditionally starts. So I whip around and I turn to the drummer, the bassist, and the percussionist. And now their eyes are like, okay, boss, where are we going? Anyway, he was in this other zone. He was just lost. He'd given himself permission to go into this improv. And at some point, he gently nodded in the percussion, nodded in the drummer, nodded in the bassist. And then they came in and now they build to this frenzy. And then finally Ted nodded me and it was on that magic carpet ride that I got to sing. I tell you, I've never had an experience like it. And the only way I could figure to describe it was that it was a kind of ambrosia going on. The boys were communicating harmonically in another level. And I felt like I was living in all of a sudden the music of the spheres. I promise you, I was not high at the time. This was the experience of the moment. And I talked to Ted about it later. I said, because he plays with such profound intuition, with such nuanced emotionality, with a level of such sophistication. And I said to him, is that where you live all the time? And he said, yeah, that's kind of where I am. So he lives at a level hearing harmonies with cat ears, with bat ears. I mean, it's extraordinary. So, when you get to be around a shaman of music at that level, I mean, come on, it elevates your life condition.
I would love to have been in the audience for that transformative moment.
Yeah.
And I wish for you that every performance, every concert you do, you get to experience, because that's not just like a prayer, that's actually healing. That's a healing vibration. Now, of course, I have to mention your wonderful partner, Patrick Duffy. He was on our show last year.
Oh, good.
He talked about how the two of you met and fell in love. I know the two of you have worked together on stage in the UK and in The Bold and the Beautiful. You were both in the 2021 movie Doomsday Mom. What's it like working together?
It's great. We were scared when we first got hired we thought, oh, this will be fun. And then we didn't say anything, but we thought, oh, what if it's a disaster? But it was great. We, as you mentioned, we have our little company together and, we're on the same page. I don't know. It's bizarrely synchronistic. We work in the same way. We have the same feeling and respect for the crew and our fellow cast members. So and I think we both are so grateful for the careers that we've had. Neither one of us have had a bad day at work. So
well, what I see is that you have the same values. You really share the same values, and you both have enormous gratitude, as you mentioned. I'm continually amazed at the versatility and the depth that you continue to demonstrate on screen, Linda. For example, one of your most recent movies is called Paul's Promise. It's based on the true story of Paul Holderfield, a bigoted firefighter who becomes a pastor and starts one of the first integrated churches in the South during the civil rights movement of the 60s. You play the family matriarch, Mimi Holderfield, and the movie has received a whole slew of prestigious film festival awards. I really hope our viewers watch that movie because you did an amazing job.
Oh, thank you so much. I was really grateful to be a part of it. I did not know these filmmakers when we jumped in together, and we shot it during COVID, which had you can imagine, I mean, it was scary actually, because there's so much unknown. Anyway, we got to do it. And I think they did such a good job on the film.
Yeah,
so and it was a wonderful role. It was a wonderful role.
It's a great movie. I hope everyone watches it. Well, Linda, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and having this opportunity to celebrate your amazing life and career. Thank you for all the great performances. Thank you for the gift of your beautiful voice. And most of all, thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
My privilege, Harvey. Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
Oh, they came from the heart. Our guest has been the incomparable actress and singer, Linda Purl. For more information about Miss Purl and to see her concert schedule and buy her music, please go to her official website, lindapurl.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.